Hello everyone, welcome to Race Resolution 101. This is Cleveland Psy with Psy Life Consulting and Hypnotherapy. And the mission of my organization is freeing the world by feeding the world one mind at a time. And I'm going to tackle the issue of race in 5 minutes. I would like to say that it can be done. We can resolve race issues in the country in a very short period of time because that's what's big on my mind. That's what's important to me, is resolving things rapidly, effectively, and sustainably. So, number one, the very first thing we can do to resolve the race issue in this country is we start with education. We have to teach a true history of the United States, the true history of this country. Europeans, I should say, the colonists have been coming to North and South and Central America from the European nations for close to 500 years, more or less. From actual colonies, such as Spain and Portugal and Italy and all these imperial colonizing nations. And here in the United States, the country's only lasted since the late 1700s. So that means that there was almost a 300-year time span of colonial existence on this landmass, interaction with indigenous peoples, and that's not being told at all. And if we were to tell the true history of that, then I think we would have a greater movement toward race resolution in this country. The other thing we would have to do is really throw out propaganda machine type stuff like Roots Saga and things like that, Amistad, a lot of these things that are put out by mainstream media that skew the vision of the past and give a one-sided view of what really happened. They do not tell stories about true events, slave revolts, slave colonies, or colonies where you had indigenous American and Aboriginal Americans as well as Europeans, women primarily, living in peace and harmony. And these societies existed consistently for a good long time, some of them as long as a century, and traded with the colonists. So we're not telling that history. And because of that, there's this vision or this ideology of black victimhood and white guilt that springs from that. So whites are guilty for all the suffering and victimization that have happened to the darker races and the eradication of the Native Americans and all that stuff. And when you look at history literally, this is not the case. You have to read history from the books of history, not from history books. I believe honestly that history books should be burned, and we should go into the Library of Congress and dig up the books of history, the actual accounts of indigenous people, the actual accounts of some of the Africans that were brought over. There are not really that many Africans brought over, and the accounts of Europeans that were brought over as well. The second thing that has to be done is we have to remove the color coding in our society. We have a kindergarten culture and kindergarten mindset in the United States, especially. I can speak for us, and actually in most colonized countries, even Brazil, and where it's very infantile and ignorant when it comes to description of race. So a person with my complexion would be considered black. Well, as you can see, my shirt's black and the background is black, but I am not. My skin is actually brown. Black in colonized cultures and Western civilization and Judeo-Christian cultures is bad. It's negative. It's evil. It's dark. It's sullen. It's dirty. It's wretched. It's wicked. And I'm not associated with any of those things. The only way that I could be associated with the color black is the assumption that my ancestors are from Africa. And going back to point number one, if we look at the true history of North America, we'll see that there were people that looked like me living in North America long before Africa even existed. And they were consistently living here in very large numbers. So if we tell the true history of this country and we remove a lot of the color coding in our racial categorization, you can't really call a fair-skinned person of European descent white because they're not the color of paper. They're not pure, holy, and righteous through and through, more so than I. So if we start calling people what they are based on anthropological or biological terms and tell history from its true and historical origins, we can resolve the race issue very rapidly and draw people together, and people can understand what really has happened and start to understand our connection as a people in North America. Alright, so if you'd like to go and get more information on some of the historical documents, the books of history, books that we can derive from the historical account, check out a wonderful book written by Don Jordan and Michael Walsh called White Cargo. It talks about the slave trade of Scottish and Irish people, the poor of Great Britain, who were brought over as slaves. It also goes into some of the statistics and the numbers of slave accounts and records that we have from Virginia in the mid and early 1700s. Helps to paint a different picture of the slave trade at that time, and I think it's an essential read for anyone who wants to better understand the race relations and problems of that nature in this country.